Welcome back to the channel. This is the Action Figure Grader, and today's video will cover recent sales on eBay for only Palitoy Trilogos. A bunch sold last night as of the making of this video, another batch from AFA/CIB, and also another seller had some Trilogos that were all graded. Very nice examples across the board, and some of the prices were pretty insane. Some of them were actually really fair deals. And I did manage to pick up two from the CIB auction lot, so really excited about those. I think by the time this video airs, I will have already unboxed and shown you guys the two that I picked up, along with one other one from last week's CIB auction. So let's go ahead and take a look, because I've got a ton to go through. The first seller I wanted to talk about is the Biker Scout Bunker. This is a seller that has had a number of really nice Trilogos lately. I did pick up three from this seller, Matt, probably maybe 2 months ago. And I didn't bid on any of the ones in this auction lot, but there were some really nice examples that I wanted to go through. So first of all was an AFA 80 Weequay. It did have a 75 subscore for the blister, but they did take mercy on him and give him the overall 80. I want you to remember this price, $152.50, because we're going to circle back to Weequay a little bit later on when we show the CIB auctions and an AFA 85 sold. So remember that $152.50 number, because this turned out to be a really good deal. And it did have a 75 subscore. It was, you know, the blister wasn't the greatest. You can see quite a bit of wear around the blister, but they did take mercy on them and give the seller an overall 80. So $152.50. Here was the squid head. This one was an overall 80, straight 80s for the subscore. That one sold for $201. Another very good deal for one that doesn't pop up that regularly. I have an AFA 80, and I think I paid I paid $175 plus shipping. So I think after shipping and everything is probably pretty close to this sales price of $201. Here was a Dengar. Now, this one was not the Spanish PBP inside, but it was the German Parker card that we talk about all the time, with the longer hang tab, thinner hang tab, and then the back is a brighter yellow. And so this is just a different factory that produced the Trilogos. So this Dengar was graded 75 plus and sold for $203.50. Pretty decent deal there. Now, this one did have the Spanish figure inside. This is the AT-AT Commander General Veers, and as you can see, the figure is the pale-face Spanish PBP variant inside. This one was graded AFA 75, and that one sold for $280. A little bit more expensive for a 75 grade, but it did have the harder to find Spanish PBP figure inside. Good deal there. Here was an AFA 80 Ugnaught. This is one I still want in my collection. I was tempted to bid on this one. I thought it was maybe just a little bit overgraded. And you can see that the blister score did get the 75. It got the overall 80, but the blister had a pretty big crunch to what almost looked like a crack. I'm assuming it was not a crack, because all of these were pretty freshly graded, I believe. But to me, it didn't quite present good enough for me to go ahead and pull the trigger on it. And the CIB auctions were all ending after this one was ending. So I decided to hold off, save my money, and try to bid on a few of the CIB auctions. But it was nice. I'm not trying to say it wasn't nice. It's just that corner scared me off enough that I just didn't want to settle for the 75 subscore for the blister. But $255, certainly a good deal relative to the AFA 85 that sold from CIB, maybe a month or two ago. I can't remember exactly when, but that one sold for significantly higher than what this one sold for at $255. The other one I was looking at was this Han. That's another one I wouldn't mind having. And you'll see there on the grading label that it says made in China. And it was an overall AFA 80. I looked it up on the population report. This is one of two that AFA has labeled made in China. Now, they have graded other examples of this Han on the Trilogo with the made in China in the lower right-hand corner. It just didn't say made in China on the AFA label. So that one of two is a little deceptive because there are other examples. There's one example right now that's at auction at Hakes that is also a made in China. It just does not have it on the grading label. So that's yet another example. And that one's an AFA 80 plus. This one was one of two actually labeled made in China. So it's a little weird how AFA does that. They change the labels sometimes. And so if you look it up on the population report, it's not going to capture all of the items that actually fit this description, that actually match the number that are out there. So for whatever that's worth, I just thought that was an interesting side note. But this AFA 80 did sell for $435. My number was in the fives. I was thinking $5 to $550. So that one actually sold a little bit less than where I expected it to go for. But again, I was focused on the CIB auction, so I kind of had to let that one go. But that was a nice example. The other one they had was a CAS 80 grade tri-logo for the Han Bespin. And that one sold for $440. And you'll see the grading label there, 80, 90, 90. So 290 subscores from CAS for $440. Not a bad deal at all, because I bought the AFA 85 that I'm going to show you here in a second for this exact same item. And I did pay more than this, but mine is an AFA 85 versus this CAS 80 that sold for $440. I thought that was a very fair deal for what it was when you have 290 subscores. That blister was very nice looking. Obviously the 90 for the figure as well. So it is what it is. Now, it looks to me like it's got a crease in the upper left-hand corner of the card back. And, why it got the card score 80 is a little, it's a little iffy to me. Maybe it's a reflection. I don't know. But at first blush, this looks like a crease going from the hang tab all the way to the edge of the card. That's what it looks to me anyway. And so I feel like it's a little overgraded personally. The card probably should have gotten a 75 subscore. Whether you could make an argument that it probably should have still gotten an 80 grade overall if it had 290 scores for the blister and figure. But in my estimation, that card subscore of 80 was too high, given that it looks to me like it's got a crease going from left to right to the hang tab. But $440 was the final sales price on that. This is another one that I thought was a very good deal. This was an AFA 75 Death Star droid. The Death Star droid on the tri-logo is very tough to find, although oddly we've had like 3 or 4 that have popped up after this is one that I had been looking for a long time. I did finally get one in the CIB auction. I bought an AFA 85, and I paid $12.40 after shipping and taxes for mine. So it was a lot of money. But this AFA 75 for $565 seems like a really good deal. That is a very good deal, given the scarcity of the Death Star droid on the tri-logo card back. 75, 75, 85 were the subscores on that. Now that blister to me looks better than the Weequay blister. This Weequay blister got a 75, but look how beat up that blister is relative to the Death Star droid blister. I mean, this blister looks really good. So, it is what it is, but I just find it interesting how AFA is hit or miss in terms of how they tend to grade things. To me, this feels like an 80 grade overall versus a 75, because that blister is certainly not, to me anyway, it doesn't look like a 75 blister. It certainly has a ding. You can see some dings in the upper right-hand corner, but to me, it probably should have been, for whatever reason, it got a card 75, which I guess, in the lower portion of the back of the card back, it had some edge wear, and then in the upper right, it had a soft crease. So let's say the card subscore of 75 is good. I still think the blister should have gotten an 80 on this one and an overall 80 for this. So whoever paid $565 on that was a really good buy, because I think it's undergraded in my opinion. So good deal there. Now here was an AFA 80 Clipper catalog version of Anakin Skywalker, unpunched as well. And that one did sell for $580, which is probably about market. I mean, that's a pretty tough combination to find. The Anakin is you don't see it too much. I mean, obviously it's not as rare as the Power of the Force version, but to find one in this clean condition with the Clipper catalog, which this is the first time I've seen the tri-logo Anakin with the Clipper. I'm sure they've shown up before. I just don't remember it. But unpunched Clipper catalog, 85, 80, 85. Very nice example, and probably a little undergraded as well. and 580 is probably in line with market, in my opinion. Here was an AFA 85 R2D2 sensor scope. Again, unpunched on this one. It did have some very faint edge wear on the left-hand side there. Now, for reference, I have a CAS 85 for this figure, also unpunched, straight 85s, and I paid $775 for mine, if memory serves. It might have been $750, somewhere in that ballpark. So this is pretty close to what I paid for mine. I would argue that mine's probably presents a little bit nicer than this one, but $710, $775, you know, this one was certainly a beautiful example, and I don't think that was an overpay by any means. I thought that was, if anything, probably a little low. So good deal there. Now on to the CIB auctions, and again, we've got a ton of them to go through here. First is the Re-Yeast. This was an AFA 85 punched example. That one sold for $305, probably about market. 85, 85, 90 too, so very high sub scores. And the weird thing is about the CIB auctions for Trilogos is that in general, the punched examples just do not command nearly the price premium that the unpunched examples do. And I can understand why to a certain extent, because most Trilogos, or at least a lot of Trilogos, came out of the factory already punched. There's not many of, for some characters, most of them already came out of the factory punch. So I get why that is. But anyway, this one did sell for $305. The Nikto sold for $350. That was also an AFA 85 punched example. And here's one I did pick up. This is the FX7. And this was an unpunched example. 85, 85, 90 were the sub scores on this one. So I paid $360 plus shipping and taxes, which I thought was very fair. I did have this one at one point. I had a UKG 75, and the reason I did end up selling it, I was probably trying to make, cobble together some money for another item, but mine had a handwritten price note in the back on the white little box on the back. It had in pink, not pink, but in ink. It was like 7 pounds or something like that. And it always bugged me. I didn't notice it when I bought it, and it was a UKG 75, so it wasn't the highest grade in the world. So I did end up selling it. I probably sold it for about $200 or so, somewhere in that ballpark. But this FX7 is a beauty, 85, 85, 90, and I paid $360, which I thought was very fair. Nice upgrade, for one that I had in my collection, sold off, and did not have in my collection anymore. So another one checked off the box there. I thought that's a beauty there. Next up was the Hoth Rebel Soldier, and this one sold for $360. It was an AFA 85, but you got to be careful with a lot of these auctions because some of the blisters have yellowed, is what I've noticed, and this one certainly looks like to be the case here. And I've got an even more egregious example a little bit later on, but to me it looked like this blister had started to yellow a little bit. And maybe you don't care about that, and that's fine, but I just want to at least make you aware is that it is possible for Trilogos to have yellowed blisters. And this one looks like it's got very faint yellowing starting since grading, since obviously the grading label does not mention the yellowing. But 85 grade for $360 on that one. Here was the EV9D9 graded AFA 85. This was also an unpunched example. Absolute stunner. That one sold for $362. I know who bought that one, and he was very happy about that. Straight 85s for the sub score on that one. That's another one that just doesn't pop up that often relative to some of the others. Here was the Rancor Keeper, also unpunched, AFA 85. That one sold for $421. Maybe a little higher than some other examples we've seen in the past, but I don't think that was a drastic overpay by any means, maybe slightly, but it is the Rancor Keeper, and it is also an AFA 85 with 290 subscores. So I think that's probably worth every bit of $421 on that. Here was the Emperor. That one sold for $470. Another unpunched example, AFA 85, $470. I've seen some punched examples go in the 300s. So, like AFA 80s, things like that. It's like $375 to $425. So I think that's probably in line, given that this one was an 85 grade with straight 85 subscores. Now, back to that Weequay. All right, so we just talked about one that was an AFA 80 that sold for $152.50. Now, this one was an AFA 85, but again, also going back to what I was mentioning about the blister, this one had yellowed. This one had yellowed. So you can see very clearly that the blister's yellowed, and it happens after grading. It's straight 85s. Now, that one sold for $510. Now, to me, I would rather pay $152.50 for an AFA 80 that was still clear blister versus an AFA 85 that now has yellowing to the blister that sold for $510. That's just my personal opinion on that, but very clearly it has yellowed since grading on that. Next up was Barada. This was an unpunched AFA 85. That one sold for $570. I think that was a very good deal. Crystal clear blister. I have an AFA 80 that I think mine's unpunched as well. I can't remember, but I paid in the fours. I think $470 for mine, somewhere in that ballpark. But for an AFA 85, Barada, $570, I think that's a really good deal for a last 17. Here was a Han trench coat, AFA 90. So this was an AFA 90 grade, very, very high grade. And that one sold for $590, which I thought was, relative to the other 90s that I'm going to show you here in a little bit. I thought that was a really good deal. It's Han trench coat on the Trilogo in this high of a grade. I can't imagine. I didn't look up the population report on this one, but I can't imagine there's a ton of them in an AFA 90. So good deal there relative to the others we're going to talk about. Here is the other one I did pick up. So this was an AFA 85 Han Solo Bespin. So I did check off the Han Bespin. It's my first Han Solo Bespin. It's actually my first Han period mint on card. So very happy. It's an AFA 85. And straight 85s for the sub score, punched example. I did look this one up on the population report, and it was one of, I think, 13 that were AFA 85s. It was a pretty good example. I mean, it wasn't perfect, but, it had some scratches or paint that had worn off on the inside of the blister. Some little rubs here and there behind the card back, it looked like, from the figure jostling inside. But it's a Han Solo Bespin, beautiful example, very happy to get it, and I paid $655 for it, plus shipping and taxes. Probably works out to about $710 or so, $720 after shipping and taxes. So it's a lot of money, but I think if I was going to pull the trigger on one, now is a good time to do it. And they combined shipping with the FX7 that I picked up, so happy about that. Next up was an unpunched Imperial Commander, graded AFA 85. That one sold for $690. And I don't know how AFA has so many high-grade Trilogos that they've sold over the last 3 to 6 months. I mean, there have been a ton of them. And the only thing I can think of is that they must have had a bunch of old stock. But when you look at the grading labels and look up when they were graded, it's all over the map. I mean, some of them have been graded recently. Some of them have been graded all the way back to like 2011. So I don't know if just somebody had a big Trilogo collection and decided to sell them all, but it's really been an interesting thing to see because we've never seen anything like it, where we've had AFA 85s, 80s, 90s, that have all been at auction, all from CIB over the last 3 to 6 months. So for you Trilogo collectors like me, this has certainly been a boon in terms of filling holes in our collection, but we've obviously had to pay a lot of money for it. But $690 on that one was a pretty good deal. Here was the Luke Skywalker in Battle Poncho. It was unpunched with no 1 pound 59 pence price sticker, AFA 85. But again, this one had a yellowed blister. You can see very clearly that the blister had yellowed since grading, which does happen with some of these Meccano French blisters. This one is very clearly the skinny, smaller Meccano blister, and those do tend to yellow a little bit easier than some of the others, like the standard Palitoy Trilogos blisters that are larger and oversized. So that one still sold for $760. Despite the yellowing to the blister. But it's just, again, you guys may not care about this kind of information, but I just want to make sure that when you bid, that you know what you're buying, because some of them do yellow after grading, and you got to really look at the photos. Here's one that I thought was a great deal. This was an AFA 85 Leia in Bouche disguise. I bought a CAS 80, and I paid more than this price. So this was an AFA 85 that sold for $787. Really good deal there. Somebody got a great deal. That to me is probably the bargain of all of the CIB auctions, believe it or not. The Trilogo Bouche is tough to find, and it's usually much more expensive than what this one goes for. And, this is one where it just kind of fell between all of the other amazing items that were ending at the same time, and somebody got a really good deal. I was expecting this one to go for over $1,000. So whoever picked that up, really good buy there. This one, on the other end of the spectrum, I was shocked by this final sales price. This was the Paplu AFA 85 is the German Parker Trilogo punched example, and that one sold for $1,009, which I don't know why that one sold as high as it did, but that's what it sold for. And it did have some high grades. I mean, it was straight 85s, but it was punched, and I don't know why that one sold for $1,009. Your guess is as good as mine on that one. The Zuckus, in all fairness, when you see that final sales price of $10.34, it was unpunched and it was an AFA 90. So you can see there 85, 90, 90. So when you start getting into the 90s, I've got another example coming up at the end of the video. When you start getting into the 90s, you're going to pay a lot of money. That's just the way it is. I did have a bid set up for this one as well, but it ended up going for more than I was willing to go for. I think my bid was going to be in the 700 range. That's what I was comfortable spending. I did not expect to win it, and I did not. At, obviously $1,034, that's a big number, but it is what it is. Another one that went for a lot of money was the hybrid Trilogo for the Bespin Security Guard. It was unpunched AFA 85. These are very tough to find, and I would argue that this, at an AFA 85, it's probably one of only, I didn't look it up, but it's probably one of only a handful, if not one of one. And it was 85, 85, 90 for the subscore. So these hybrid Trilogos have a standard Palitoy front, and then they have the Trilogo back. And they did it for some of the Cantina creatures, the white and black Bespin Security Guard, and the Cloud Car palette is obviously another very expensive one that we've talked about recently that sold for big money. So 1136, I'm not going to knock you on that one because that's a really hard to find Trilogo, especially in that grade unpunched. So big time buy there. Next up was a Imperial Dignitary unpunched AFA 85 with the £1.59 price sticker. And what's interesting is this one also was packed in with the blaster. You can see they labeled that on the AFA label, and then on the actual figure there, it's packed in with the black Palace blaster. So very interesting error, and that one sold for big money, $11.75. But that's a beauty. I know who bought that, so I'm not going to speak ill about the price, but we all have our thing, right? We all pick and choose how we want to spend our money, and he chose to buy this one, and that one was a beauty. I mean, that's one I still am looking for in my collection, but maybe next year I can grab one. Here was an AFA 85 TIE Fighter palette. I was very curious to see what this one would go for because I picked up an AFA 80 a few months back on Hakes. And I paid a lot of money for mine. I paid about $900 for mine. It might have been even $940, somewhere in that ballpark. But this was an AFA 85, so one grade higher, or two grade notches higher, going from 80 to 80 plus to 85. Straight 85s for the subscore, and the price did not disappoint at $1,614. Huge number again, and again, it's the German Parker. You can see there by the hang tab and by the back of the card that it's the German Parker version. And again, sometimes they label it as such, sometimes they don't, but this one was a beauty, and this is another character that's very tough to find on the Trilogo card back. But 1614, I breathed a little bit of a sigh of relief because my AFA 80 at around 940 looks pretty good relative to what this one sold for, but that one was a stunner. Finally, here was the big one, and a huge shock in terms of the final sales price, although I probably should not have been surprised, but this was an AFA 90 Trilogo Chewbacca, AFA 90. Now, it was a punched example, but I'm looking at the figure there. It's tough to know for sure, okay? It says made in Hong Kong, but looking at those eyes, those eyes look like Chewbacca went out on the town. He sniffed a little bit of Wookiee fungus or something, man. He is wide-eyed there. I think this has the potential to be a Spanish PvP inside the blister there. So I don't know for sure on that. I didn't look up in the Javier Ruy Lopez book as to kind of the paint apps, but to me it looks a little bit different than the standard Hong Kong Chewbacca. It's, again, it says made in Hong Kong, but there are a lot of made in Hong Kong card backs that have Spanish PvP figures inside. And I think that that's what that is personally. I don't know for sure, but that one was a pretty cool item. AFA 90, straight 90s for the subscore. You knew it was going to go for a lot of money, but 3267, absolutely massive number. But pretty cool to see that one sell. I was just really curious to see. Obviously, it had the Rockstar Chewbacca alternate image on the card back as well. I mean, that had a lot going on for it. I think that is the Spanish Trilogo or Spanish PBP inside personally, but you know, who knows? Either way, it's certainly not your standard figure. This is not a standard Hong Kong based on those paint apps, if I had to look at it. But wow, what an awesome item. 3267. That is an absolute crazy final number for an AFA 90 Trilogo. So again, all Trilogos, if you don't like Trilogos, this was not the video for you, but there are a lot of you like me that like to collect them. Very excited about the two that I was able to pick up, and I'm sure by the time this video airs, I will have done an unboxing video. Thank you as always for watching. Please be sure to leave me a like if you enjoyed the video, and I'll be back soon.